Today on the podcast, we have Dawn Manske. Dawn is on a mission to empower women around the world and fight against human trafficking. I'll let her share her story here on today's episode of how she got started, but she essentially started it with zero business skills and a pair of pants, and has been able since then to provide over 20,000 hours of dignified employment to women around multiple centers across the world. And one of the things that I'd love for you to take away from today's episode is one, that you can make a difference right now, not just with buying products from companies that are social causes, but you can also create the difference. If there's an issue that you see in society, if there's an issue that you see that you want to apply your skill set to your brain power or just your creative thought, you can do that. And I want Dawn to be able to encourage you so that you can learn from her story. In addition, if you're running a business or you're an enterprise and you're growing your profits, looking at other ways to diversify your investments in order to create a greater outcome, not just for your team, your employees, but also your community and society as a whole. Now, without further ado, let's have our conversation here with Dawn. Well, Dawn, thanks so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Don, I speak to a lot of business founders, CEOs, owners, and typically there's a trajectory where we focus on creating purpose or focusing on purpose within the organization so that the team, the shareholders or stakeholders know that the work that is being done is done for a greater purpose, for something that adds meaning and value, not only to the work, but also to society. You kind of started with that from the get-go, and I'd love to kind of get your origin story and how you decided to step into this field and make a difference with how you mentioned by selling a pair of jeans.
A pair of pants, yeah. It was kind of this collision of three things. I say it was a collision of three things, but in reality, it was probably the result following the three things. So I lived in China for quite a while. And during a visit to Thailand, if you live in the United States and you want a beach, you go to Florida. Mm-hmm. If you live in China and you want a beach, you go to Thailand. That's just, so I did a vacation there and I found these incredibly fun pants. And they're super comfortable. I had never seen pants like these before. And I was so excited about these pants. I wore them all the time. Well, I only had one pair. And when I came back from China, I was wearing these pants because I love them. But during that time, from my time in China and coming back, I started to see what human trafficking is. And this was an issue that weighed on my heart. And while I was in China, I would visit art orphanages and they would be full of little girls. And that broke my heart. And understanding now devaluation of the girl child is a huge vulnerability in our world. And that makes females vulnerable to exploitation. Another thing that I saw while I was there was I saw street kids. And this, if you ever saw Slumdog Millionaire, mm-hmm. Very similar situation. Like these kids not living on the streets, but it seemed like they were living on the streets, but begging, asking for money, doing little odds and end chore things just to get some money. So a friend of mine actually explained to me, these kids came from very poor areas of China and they were brought by a boss or what we would call a trafficker so that he could make them work for him. And it was labor trafficking. And, the trafficking was not the term we were using at that time, but I started to see how children, how women, how people were being exploited. And then I think what really set it off was I watched a video of an undercover reporter who went into Cambodia asking about the youngest girls he could find. And it just made me sick. They show him going into these back alleys. They show these girls being ushered into a room, maybe 7, 8 girls, I don't know. From the age, they looked like they were from maybe 7 years old to 13. Mm-hmm. Wow. And my stomach turned, my heart broke, and I And that was kind of when I realized this is a much bigger thing than this kids living on on the
Horrible.
sidewalks
Yeah.
in Beijing. This is a huge thing. And so sex trafficking really became something that I was keenly aware of and
Mhm.
wanted to learn more about and wanted to do something. Like that was the biggest thing. What can I do to help fight this? So fast forward a little bit, I'm still thinking about this. I'm like, what can I do? What can I do? I get married, you know, it just is part of the story. But as I married this incredibly wonderful young man, he's 3 months younger, so I call him a young man. Um, and we got married, and two wedding gifts that I received for the wedding. One was a gift from him, which was a pair of sandals that I had seen that were really this amazing example of social enterprise. And it told the story of these young ladies who, in another country, were able to further their education because of the jobs they had making the sandals. I liked the sandals. I thought they were cute. And I was with my fiance, soon to be husband. I was like, oh, aren't these cute? I hinted as much as I possibly could. He did not catch it at all, but his friend did. So I ended up with the sandals as a wedding gift from him, from my husband. Well, another friend was at the time of my wedding teaching in Thailand. And she was coming to the wedding and wanted to bring a gift. And I said, you're coming to the wedding. You don't need to bring a gift. But she's British.
Oh.
Actually, she's Welsh. And they're so formal. I'm like, I know she's going to. What it doesn't matter what I say. So I said, bring me some of these pants. I love these pants. She brings the pants. So of course, the next day, what do you think I'm wearing? We're leaving for the honeymoon. What do you think I'm wearing?
Pants and the sandals.
Of course. And something on top. Don't worry.
Of
I wasn't,
course. No, I know.
yeah, of course. So I'm wearing the pants and we're just in line like everybody else. And a TSA agent comments on my pants.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, I got them in touch. She's like, those are really cool. Where'd you get them? I get on the plane and the flight attendant comments on my pants. And I visit a friend in the hospital and a stranger comes up. Oh, tell me about your pants. And
Mhm.
literally, and I'm not kidding, a woman chased me in a parking lot to
Oh,
ask
wow.
me about the pants. And I'm like, okay, this is messed up. And I'm thinking, I love helping people. That's just kind of who I am. I want to help these people, but I don't want to sell pants.
Mhm.
I'm like, I'm sorry, you're going to have to get your own pants from Thailand. This was not easy to get. You can't find them in the United States, neither can I, but no. And I thought, I could start a little import export company selling
Mhm.
pants. I could get the pants from Thailand and sell them. I don't want to sell pants. But then they all kind of came together.
Mhm.
And I remembered the story of the sandals and this issue that was just weighing on me. And I was like, but if these pants could be the foundation of a business that could help people coming out of this situation, then I would sell pants. So Made for Freedom was born with very little, no, let's just be real, zero business experience
Yeah.
and education, um, but a whole lot of passion and drive to help people either at risk or those who have survived exploitation.
And I want to dive into that a little bit because there is an intersection of where we can take this and discuss around how you married a cause or purpose and are now able to create strategy behind that. But in the beginning, you saw a need, but then you also kind of saw an object of pants, right? It's they're great, but you didn't want to create a business around that. But you saw what they could be or what they could be used for and saw
Mhm.
the end cause for it. I'm curious to know, just to get your perception for it. Um, Obviously, when you run a business, it has to be profitable. There's only one way to live, and profits are like blood for the body. How did you see if it's either a dichotomy or a unison of both the profits and your purpose, and how you align that together as you grew the business, um, as you grew selling these pants?
It's tough. Anyone who started a business, it anybody knows it's tough. And
Mhm.
then you try to start a social enterprise and you're trying to tell two stories at once.
Mm.
and everyone in the business world will say you need to focus on one thing.
Mm.
Well, we never focus on just one thing. It's not just the pants. If you want to talk about the pants, we're going to talk about the pants because of sex trafficking. You want to
Mhm.
talk about sex trafficking, I'm going to talk to you about sex trafficking, and the result of how we're helping is the pants. So
What
it's
mechanism? Yeah.
yeah, it definitely they are married. There was a good word that you
Mhm.
used. They are married, the cause and the solution. Um, and the revenue part of it, I'm not going to lie, it's still a struggle,
Mhm.
figuring out how do we compete with brands selling fashion items. So a little bit more of the story after we got the pants, we realized I went on a research trip to India just to learn about human trafficking.
Wow.
Like, I need to know more about this, and spent 2 weeks visiting centers that were restorative centers, that were safe houses. I met girls that had been trafficked and had been rescued.
Wow.
I met people who were providing legal services and counseling. So I go on this research trip, but one of the things that they show us and becomes very evident is providing dignified employment for that person after they are out of exploitation, or providing it before for those who are vulnerable, is hugely impactful. And
So
and I knew all along it wasn't really about the pants. That was just kind of what triggered the whole thing. That
almost
was
like
the
the tool.
catalyst.
Yeah. It's almost like the tool that you're
Yeah.
using.
Well, and I don't think I ever would have landed here without literally women coming out of the woodwork talking about my pants. Like, this is weird.
Yeah.
Like, people just shouldn't be commenting on pants. Listen, I love the pants, but it really was kind of that you see, and I hesitate to say the need.
Mhm.
This is not, when you write a business plan, you talk about what's the issue. The issue really is not women in the United States need more clothing. Like that,
Yeah.
I can't, I cannot stand behind that as a problem in our world.
Yeah.
But that desire, that interest that was piqued so often, so regularly, helped me understand people really like these. And here's the need. The need is providing dignified employment for those who need it. So, understanding better the dignified employment, what I did was I connected with some of those centers that
Mm.
I visited. One of the centers makes t-shirts, organic cotton, amazing t-shirts. The women coming out of a red light district that has over 11,000 women being prostituted out.
Wow.
This center works with ladies, teaches them how to read and write, teaches them how to sew, and then provides jobs.
Mm.
Like, that changes lives.
Yep.
And why? What's the result of that? It's a t-shirt. So the t-shirt doesn't seem all that significant until you understand dignified employment is what's
What's
driving
what's
this.
producing it? Yeah, that's the story. And then that it's beautiful in multiple ways. The first is that work drives a difference, like how we can contribute to society through our work, but also how it can
Mhm.
change someone's life by giving them dignified employment, which I think is it has many facets of beauty towards it. And I'm curious to know, like, so from my understanding is that you've created this network with these centers, and then they
Yeah.
have a specific product that they create, and that output of a product you work to their then sell, correct? And that's how you kind of created the infrastructure.
Right. Right. So we partner with about 15 centers around the world. Some of them, some of them we give them a design and we say, "Hey, can you make this for us?"
Mm.
Some of them already have products and we just choose and say, "We think that this would work with our audience." We try to One thing we've tried to do is kind of hone in on professional women,
Yeah.
because as much as I love the fair trade look and all the colors, under now owning a business and being a businesswoman, I understand, okay, there's kind of a different look, but I want to wear things that are made with dignity. So anyway, we look for items that are providing that dignified employment for those who are vulnerable or survivors,
Yeah.
and kind of appeal to the professional woman.
I love that you're finding your niche there. How do you balance the supply and demand? Because the supply seems to be an output of what is being taught in the specific center. If it's a con t-shirt, if it's a fair trade kind of look, or if it's a professional look, do you influence a lot of the supply that's created based on, hey, maybe we should focus on these kinds of products and maybe shift a little bit based on what the demand is? Or is it whatever is being supplied, I look for a demand?
I'd say a combination.
Hmm.
A lot of what we carry is actually created by the centers. The t-shirts are a little bit different. They have also, for a long time, it was just a t-shirt. And then I had to find somebody to screen print them. But they got their own screen printing machines and they're doing the screen printing. And just side note, very cool trip to India in 2019. I was able to visit the center again, I think my third time visiting. And while I was there, they were screen printing our hummingbird and our t-shirts.
Oh,
And it was so like the ladies recognized, they saw a hummingbird from our logo on my phone and they were like, oh my gosh, we know that hummingbird,
awesome.
Um,
That's awesome.
so I get to decide what's on the t-shirt, and that's
Okay.
pretty easy, and then other things, I do kind of, we work with a group in Nashville, I believe, that does bath and body.
Mhm.
And, I have I have to admit I've dropped several hints about, oh, I really like grapefruit scrubs, you know, because they don't have any, but kind of looking at what the market is wanting,
Mhm.
what's going to sell well. And it's kind of a combination of what do these centers provide? What do they have already?
Yeah.
And how can I, so we have our hummingbird, for example, one of the centers that makes jewelry. They don't make custom jewelry unless you specifically request and you order a certain amount. And so we have our hummingbird
Mhm.
on, a charm on our hummingbird that we use on a necklace and a bracelet and earrings. So there's kind of a combination. One center, we wanted yoga mat bags.
Huh.
They had never made a yoga mat bag. So then I become overseeing the tech pack,
Oh,
and
wow.
how do you put together a tech pack for the pants. And well, in the pants, we redesigned the pants. I don't think I mentioned that. The Thai fisherman pant, we redesigned it. And I thought, well, we changed the pant, we probably should change the name. And so we changed the name to Kriya Belly, which is taken from creating a beautiful life, because I wanted it
I love
to
that.
to represent that. So it's a combination.
So it's pretty interesting because it sounds like you have a flywheel within your business, and then this is speaking from Jim Collins's work about what a flywheel is and how it feeds upon itself. But essentially, you have the strategy to focus on what will sell, what is the supply, and how do I marry that based on the product development. But then also tying that back to a social impact and being able to measure that because you're not just buying and selling products, you're marrying that activity to a value add to society, especially to a vulnerable part of society. How do you measure the social impact, and how do you make sure you stay true to your cause and continue to expand upon that?
You know, I'll answer that in two ways. Um, the first being the way we measure impact, which we're an LLC,
Mhm.
we're a for-profit company, and that's part two. Is it was incredibly difficult. That was a decision that was incredibly difficult at the beginning as I started, and it still kind of teases me every once in a while and haunts me. Should we be a nonprofit? Should we be a for-profit? But we are a for-profit. We have chosen that path for lots of reasons. Each way has pros and cons. That's all there is to it. You could run our books through a nonprofit lens and we'd be fine. Like that's how we run our company. But we have chosen to be for profit for all sorts of reasons. So I'm not required as a for profit. And yes, it's beneficial. It can be a good marketing tool. It can be whatever. But because we were based, our entire reason for existence is because we want to create impact in this issue.
Mhm.
How do we tell that? How do we provide that information? And it's a very because these centers are all different. We're partnering with 15 or more centers. Each one of them is providing different things. Not all of them are working with survivors of trafficking. Some of them are working with those who are incredibly vulnerable.
Yeah.
So, what we have landed on is hours of dignified employment because we're not a give back. We're not a one for one. There are all these business
Different
models that
models. Yeah.
are really, really good, and it has been exciting to see consumers learn a little bit more about how their purchases can impact lives.
Yeah.
But I will say not all give backs, not all buy one give one are good. They're good at a level,
But the level
but
of impact that they can take, I know there's been different studies and different reports around that, and it sounds to me too like in the inception of your company, you've found an issue and you solved it in a creative way through pants first. And then here, the issue that you're looking at is what is the best way to structure so that we can provide the best impact to the target intended audience that we really want to help and uplift and empower. And I don't think that there is a right or wrong answer. I'm just curious to know how you've kind of constructed that answer. And the hours seems to be a very straightforward way that you employ people, and the longer that you keep them employed, the goal would be to get them out of any opportunity or any negative impact for their life. It's pretty interesting because my first business, I think 10 years ago, if I look at the clock or the year, right? I think my first business that I ever tested and did was a nonprofit. It's the first time I ever did a nonprofit. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I created stickers and I sold stickers that supported a um, a school in downtown here in San Diego that educated those children that were homeless. And
Mhm.
I mean, it made sales, it made money, but I just didn't, I was totally uneducated about nonprofits and what it meant. But that was my first shot at a nonprofit. And that's when I decided I will not do nonprofits. I'm only going to be for profit. But I think that the whole purpose is, and that's my personal opinion, but I think the whole idea around a nonprofit, you have to make profits if you're a nonprofit or a for-profit company. You just have to
Mhm.
look at the ways that you reinvest those profits back into the cause or back into reinvesting to support the cause. So I don't
Mhm.
think there should be a dichotomy between nonprofit and for-profit, obviously with the legal side, but there are such thing as like B certified companies or companies that
B
are,
Corp.
yeah, B
Mhm.
Corp, and with that, I feel like because you're solving this problem in a unique way, your real business model seems to be the actual platform that you've created, not the
Mhm.
product that you're selling. The product that you're selling is the value add, but the actual connections that you've made and the relationships and the network, I think that's where the real value is and how you're creatively solving the issues that come across with business. But that's where I believe the true value to be coming from, because not everyone can create that kind of network.
Thank you for the kind words. It's hard, and walking out into, like, if I go to an event and I'm trying to sell our products, the number of people who want to be conscientious consumers, but the way they approach it, they assume because we have given ourselves this label, and we're pursuing a B Corp certification because I think that's an amazing thing that has come out. Um, but they assume if you're for profit, then I'm getting rich off of this.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh no. And if you are a nonprofit, they don't think that you should be making any money. Like, the perceptions
Yeah.
around, and traditionally, I think things are changing. There's more of this gray area. There are those nonprofits, and they just keep giving, and they're providing, and the people they're providing for, it's kind of like the training. So with the centers that we partner with, when they provide training for the survivors, or those coming into their program, there is no revenue coming from that. That just has to be provided. The
Mm.
legal services, there's no revenue coming from a survivor.
Yeah.
And so understand it's that whole, where's the revenue coming from? So if a company, I know of a place in Honduras. We just bought some coffee because as soon as I heard about it, I'm like, there's a group in Honduras. They're running an eye clinic, and they're running an eye clinic for the people who can't afford to go to the eye doctor. So they're not generating revenue, but oh, they can grow really nice coffee.
Yeah.
And I was like, social enterprise. That's how they're making money to pay for the eye clinic, to provide the services for the people who can't afford to go to the eye doctor.
Yeah.
So and sometimes it's hard, so they're running two businesses now. They're running an eye clinic and they're running a coffee company.
Yeah.
You know,
Which gets complicated, right? But I think looking back
yes.
here, because when I work with clients one-on-one and we review, typically if you're in the service-based industry or when I say services, I mean digital services. That's where I
Right.
specialize in. But essentially those businesses are cash flow businesses.
Mhm.
It's all cash flow. And I always tell them you got to reinvest that into an asset that can grow. And then that assets we can talk about separately, but those are different types of vehicles, not all just financial vehicles, actually other businesses that you can create an asset to create higher multiples. But the whole idea here is that what you just mentioned was the same thing. The coffee company is the cash flow to fund and reinvest to an asset, but this asset is a social impact, social cause, social business. And that's what I think is important to know. And for our listeners, if you're if you see a problem that you really want to solve, I mean, just listening to this story, just Dawn's own personal story about how zero experience, saw something great. Now she's 15, groups in. I don't know how many hours have you like employed, if you have a number.
25,000.
25,000 hours. That is significant to the number of employees. You see,
Hours of dignified employment,
sorry.
not quite employees. No, that's
No, but
okay.
you know what I was getting
If
at, the hours that the
Yeah,
dignified employment. So if you're seeing an issue in the market right now, if you're seeing something that's a social cause that you can find a creative way to do it, you can do it. That's the key here. The second too is if you're in a business and you're looking, how can I create a more stakeholder friendly approach, not only just for the shareholders, but also for my community or society in general. You can start looking at other creative ways to create vehicles to be able to uplift communities that are vulnerable or uplift communities that make a difference or that you care most about, and to add more purpose to the work that you're doing. So there is a two-edged piece to this. But Dawn, I think the most important thing as well is for our listeners and audience out there, what's the best place that people can go to one, learn more about, Made for Freedom, and learn more about you?
madeforfreedom.com is a good place. We have a nonprofit arm where I have done some interviews of people that are doing really incredible things. Not Made for Freedom Foundation, but madeforfreedom.com is where you can read some of our stories, some of our supply chain issues. I mean, just in trying to get a necklace, I just have to say this because it was just so funny. Oh, no, not at the time. Now looking back, it's kind of funny, but you said something about supply chain issues. We started selling a ton of this necklace. Beautiful, says seek justice, love mercy, walk humbly, was hitting the market beautifully. We needed more. We talked to our people. This group has centers in multiple cities. The one that primarily makes the necklaces is in China. And they work with survivors coming out of red light districts in the southern part of China. And they said, oh, when do we place the order? Well, Chinese New Year's coming, and basically the country shuts down for a month.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I need more. So they said, oh, but we have another center. We're working with survivors in another country as well. This was last year. And they moved everything over there. And all of the supplies went to where was the other country? Burma or Myanmar, whichever you'd like to call it. And then there was a military coup.
Uh,
So, like things like that, when you're dealing with 15 centers, we're still a small business.
yeah.
And we're dealing with national holidays, military coup. And then I was just really happy that once they did ship them, they had to ship them through Thailand because you don't send huge box. They ended up making them in Burma. The ladies found it a very good distraction to the chaos that was happening on the streets outside. They ended up shipping them to Thailand, to the others, one of the other centers they have, because you don't want to send a huge box when your country is rebelling against democracy.
Yeah.
I guess you don't want to send a huge box to the United States.
Yeah.
So they send them to Thailand, and then there was flooding in Thailand. And I was just grateful once they finally arrived. Well, once they said that they were shipping them, I was grateful they weren't on a container ship stuck in the Suez Canal. So, when we're a small
The
business
journey. Yeah. It's a journey.
dealing with a global issue, but also dealing with global supply chain issues.
Everything that is impacted for large businesses does impact small businesses, but you're navigating through it. And I think that's a huge value add here that our listeners can also take away. For everyone here listening today, thank you for allowing us to be a small part of your journey. If you have any comments or to thank Dawn for her being on, please reach out to her. We'll leave those links in the show notes. And until next time, do good work. Thank you for being here with us today. It's an honor to be a small part of your journey. If you gained new insights on today's episode, please head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a comment with the insight that you've learned. While you're there, you can also leave us up to a 5-star review. And if you have any specific topic suggestions or questions that you'd like me to go deeper on future episodes, please drop me a line at podcast@dogoodwork.io. That's podcast@dogoodwork.io. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.